Austin Matthews, who is currently 9-1 with Bant Rights, and he's playing against Michael Segal, who is currently 9-1 on Blue-Red Eldrazi. So we're going to get going. Austin's going to be on the play. He's just going to lead off with the Yavimaya Coast. Michael Segal's going to have a Highland Lake. Austin just has a Evolving Wilds and passes back. So both players are going to develop their mana here over the first couple of turns.
And for the most part, this is going to be a pretty classic aggro versus control deck. The blue-red Eldrazi deck, it's got some answers in the form of counter spells. It's got some red removal spells. It's got Kozilek's Return as a sweeper. It also has Spatial Contortion, which is a removal spell we don't see too often. But so it's going to be looking to draw the game out and go big with something like an Ulamog, whereas Austin is looking to use cards like Collected Company, Cryptolith Rite, accelerate out some threats, get a lot of stuff on the board that's kind of hard to deal with, and pressure Michael's life total as fast as possible.
Yeah, those Spatial Contortions are going to line up very well against Austin's threats. Austin does have a Cryptolith Rite on turn 2 and another Evolving Wilds.
So Cryptolith Rite, actually on turn 3, is not really the fast start that Austin probably wants, but he can catch up for lost time with that Cryptolith Rite or a card like Collected Company. So we'll have to see how things go from here. I would categorize this, though, as a little bit of a slow start for Austin.
Michael's start, though, is looking great. He has all of his colors, including colorless, so that he can use counter spells, removal spells, basically anything he needs. We've got an Eldrazi Sky Spawner here. He's going to take a point of damage for his Yavimaya Coast. Michael Segal's going to use Clash of Wills for 1 to counter it, keep that board clear.
And hitting his 4th land drop with no creatures on the board and 20 life is got to make Michael feel great in this situation.
Now, Michael looks like he's playing something much closer to what Ali Eldrazi had, where he does have 4 copies of Spell Shrivel and no Void Shatters. So next turn, if he has something like Hedron Archive, he's going to be able to play the Hedron Archive off of his 5th land and still have mana available to use a counterspell.
Yeah,
and that is important.
Yeah, that's a really nice sequence to be able to ramp up your mana while still having mana available for a counterspell is pretty nice lineup play.
Michael's just going to play another copy, Shrine of the Forsaken God, and pass back to Austin Matthews. Look, Austin has hit a couple lands in a row here with that Llanowar Waste, and now he has a Westval Abbey in his hand. And he has 2 copies of Collected Company in his hand. So at this point, he just has to kind of jam them on Michael's end step and hope he can get one of them to resolve.
Yeah, this Westval Abbey is pretty interesting. It's only a 1-of in this deck, and being 3 colors, the mana can be a little sketchy. He doesn't have a really good source of token generation. He's got the Eldrazi Sky Spawner, but that's basically it. He can potentially just blink that over and over again with Eldrazi Displacer, though, which is kind of an interesting line we could see being taken.
Michael just has an island and a pass. Looks like Austin is going to fire off one of those Collected Companies. Michael's going to use Clash of Wills for 2 to counter it. We might just see Austin untap and try and play another Collected Company here.
You know, it's pretty funny. For most of this standard format, we've seen counter spells be kind of weak. Even a lot of the control decks have had a pretty small number of them. Usually it's just the Esper Dragons deck playing 4 Silumgar's Scorn, and that's like the most counter spells you'll see in a control deck. But we're starting to see these counter spells really start to come to the forefront, both in this blue-red Eldrazi deck, but also the blue-white aggro deck we saw last round.
Yeah, well, as things start to get more and more mid-range, the counter spells become more and more playable.
That is for sure.
So Michael is going to charge up his Majoring Network here, and now Austin has the opportunity to resolve a Collected Company if he wants to. However, if Michael were to play another Shrine of the Forsaken Gods next turn, he can just jam an Ulamog.
Yeah, Ulamog is...
Well, actually, just any land will let him Ulamog because he has that Majoring on 3. There's 6 mana for a Drowner of Hope.
And this is going to let him deploy a threat and hold mana open for a counterspell. So again, Michael's just looking to sequence 2 spells a turn. Seems to be like the name of the game in a lot of these matchups. If you can just sequence more spells a turn than your opponent, you know, that's just one of the classic like Magic fundamental ways to get ahead.
All right, well, that Collected Company is going to resolve for Austin. He's going to get an Eldrazi Displacer and a Sylvan Advocate.
So Eldrazi Displacer is usually a great way to get through big blockers, but Drowner of Hope is not going to be one of the things that Eldrazi Displacer is good against, unfortunately.
All right, well, Michael's going to stop Austin on his on Michael's end step still. He's going to use a Spatial Contortion to take care of that Eldrazi Displacer.
Yeah, a good move. In a lot of these situations where you have limited removal, you kind of want to save it for specific key cards. Eldrazi Displacer is one of those key cards that you would like to keep off the board.
One of the things that I really like about this blue-red Eldrazi deck is how resilient it is to the card Reflector Mage.
Yeah.
Like both Drowner of Hope and Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger are not the targets you really want to be Reflector Maging.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the things you need to think about when you're building a deck. If you're looking to have a few threats that are really good at stabilizing the board, you need to make sure that they're good at stabilizing the board, even in the face of a card like Reflector Mage or Eldrazi Displacer.
Well, Austin's going to take a point of damage to play his Reflector Mage. He is going to go ahead and bounce that Drowner of Hope from Michael Segal. With that Cryptolith right, though, and the creatures that he is able to play a Reality Smasher that he has in his hand. Looks like he is just going to attack with a Duskwatch Recruiter. Michael's going to put both Eldrazi Scions in front of it. He's going to activate that Recruiter's ability, find another Duskwatch Recruiter. Let's see if he decides to... Oh, I guess he can't play it because that Reflector Mage does have Summoning Sickness. Michael has a lot of mana here, and something like an Ulamog is just going to be lights out for Austin.
Say Ulamog is usually lights out. As long as you can play it at a healthy life total, you're going to be in great shape.
All right, we've got a Reality Smasher for Austin.
And the Reality Smasher resolves. This is going to be a pretty big deal. This card's really hard to deal with. The best way that Michael has to deal with it once it's hit the board is probably flashing back a Kozilek's Return, but he's got to get that Kozilek's Return into play or into the graveyard before he can flash it back.
All right, well, Michael is just going to go ahead and sacrifice his spawning pool, or his spawning bed, get some blockers, going to chump a couple of those creatures. Well, he's going to use some of them to block the Sylvan Advocate.
I think the most likely way that Michael ends up dealing with this Reality Smasher is just to play Drowner of Hope and block.
Here's another Drowner of Hope.
I remember I was playing the Esper control deck that Reed Duke designed for a little while that had Ugin in it, but it had almost no other win conditions. And one of my favorite plays when playing that deck was just get a Mage Ring Network all the way up to 8 counters and then just play your Ugin with like all of your mana open. I have to imagine that that's one of the plays that this deck looks to do also. Mage Ring Network is a card that you don't get to see too often, but it really is quite the powerful card. And he played 2 Drowner of Hopes.
In one turn.
That is huge.
2 Drowners. He's got 3 Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. That's going to bump his mana up along with that Mage Ring Network.
He's got 15 power and toughness on the board. No big deal.
That is a lot. And I believe that he can actually tap down those Reality Smashers. That this only affects spells that your opponent has.
Yeah.
So he can just use an Eldrazi Scion to tap down that Reality Smasher. Austin doesn't have any good attacks at that point.
Yeah. That isn't exactly a long-term solution to the Reality Smasher. So I think there's a good chance he also just decides to block with one of the Drowner Hopes, especially since he has 2. Austin would love to have a card like Dramoka's Command in this situation, but he's built his deck in a way where that is just not something he has available.
Looks like he's just got another copy of Reality Smasher.
And now Michael's kind of put to the test. I like the idea of blocking a Reality Smasher with a Drowner of Hope because it still leaves one of them in play. But losing both of your Drowner of Hopes is something that's not as desirable. It looks like Austin's not even going to.
He's not even going to go into his combat step. He's just going to flat pass the turn.
Wow. So what he's looking to do here is get some Duskwatch Recruiter activations, and then he can freely trade those Reality Smashers and still have a lot of gas to reload with. But I think that I would have at least gone to combat, and maybe the players did. We actually can't hear them. So he might have gone to combat, and Michael would have just said, come at me, bro.
Yeah. Well, Michael's going to use a Scion to tap down a Reality Smasher. Looks like he has another copy of Drowner of Hope in his hand.
when 2 Drowner of Hopes weren't enough. And I wonder what the reasoning was to tap 1 Reality Smasher on Michael's turn. Looks like Austin, oh, I guess that's them going to combat.
All right, so we're going to get a Spatial Contortion on the Desk Watch Recruiter.
And this looks to be a big attack.
He's going to tap down the other Reality Smasher, send in all of his creatures. Austin can, eat one of those Scions or chump 5 points of damage. But this is going to look real bad for Austin once Michael plays his other Drowner that's in his hand. And then he might even have enough mana after that to pop his last spawning bed.
Yeah, and so we see Michael going from the control role, where he's trying to clog up the board and defend, and now he is full on the attack. And he is pushing damage, has Austin almost dead, and these Scion tokens are going to allow him to potentially push through the last bit of damage.
Yeah, he effectively has 5 more taps.
Yep.
Since he can use the 2 Scions that he currently has, and then the 3 Scions that he can get from the spawning bed that's still on the battlefield. And these Drowner of Hopes are just going to go aggro real quick.
Yeah, we went from defense to you're dead.
Sometimes the best defense is a good offense.
I like that.
That's an Andrew Boswell quote.
Yeah.
Michael Segal is going to take game 1 here against Austin Matthews with his blue-red Eldrazi deck over Bant Wrights. Let's take a look at their sideboards and see if we can figure out what they're planning on doing. So we have 3 Matter Reshaper, 1 Reality Smasher, 2 Dromoka's Command, 3 Thought Not Seer, 3 Negate, and 3 Declaration in Stone for Austin. What do you think he's going to do?
So I think there's a good chance that Dromoka's Command comes in. He didn't see any red removal that game, but I have to imagine that he expects a card like Kozilek's Return. And Dromoka's Command is just great against that, as well as having some other utility. And then the other card is Thought Not Seer. Michael's deck is a little threat light, so just making him exile like the 1 Drowner of Hope that's in his hand, can prove to be really profitable, even if that Thought Not Seer ends up dying. And then Negate is another way to fight Michael's ramp, fight his counter spells, fight his removal. So I think all of those cards can come in. And Reality Smashers is just going to be a nice big body to bring in.
On Michael's side, we have 3 Negate, 3 Fiery Impulse, 3 Fevered Visions, a Deceiver of Forms, 2 Kozilek's Return, 2 Thought Not Seer, and a Drowner of Hope. What do you think Michael's going to sideboard?
So I think that Michael is likely to bring in the Kozilek's Returns. Austin has a lot of small creatures, and then flashing it back is always going to be extremely powerful. I think that Michael is likely to bring in Thought Not Seer also. Being able to tag one of Austin's Reality Smashers would be really good, and it just gives Michael a big body that can do some blocking, as well as an early play so that he doesn't die to an early rush. And the Drowner of Hopes, they were so good game 1, why not bring in another?
Yeah, one of the differences between this and Jim's build is that Jim had 4 Drowner of Hope in his main deck.
Yeah.
And here we see Michael has the 4th in his sideboard, and that card just feels like an all-star for me. I think I just want to have 4 copies of it in my deck.
Yeah, I like it.
So while our players are finishing up their sideboarding here, we're starting to get down to the last rounds of the event. Some players are looking at, potential win-and-ins starting as early as next round if you're Jerry Thompson and you're undefeated.
If you're Jerry Thompson, the win-and-ins come early and often.
So let's take a look at the prize payout so we can see just what these players are battling for. First place gets you an invite to the Invitational, gets you $5,000 in cold hard cash, and most importantly, 30 SCG points. That is a huge boon if you're trying to qualify for the Players' Championship, either through the seasonal race or at the end of the year with that Player of the Year race. 30 points is a lot. If you happen to get second place, you get that invite to the Invitational, $20,000 in cash, but 25 SCG points is still a big chunk. Top 4 is going to get you $1,000 and 20 points. Top 8 is going to give you $500 and 15 points. But also, if you look all the way down there to top 64, you get $100 and 4 SCG points, which is still a decent amount on a weekend if you're just trying to grind into those events. And there were only 67 players that made day 2 at this event, so almost everybody that made day 2 is going to cash.
Yeah.
And this event was almost capped. So we have 700 players here. Almost everybody that made day 2 is making some money. this is just a great event.
Yeah, the Opens are great value. They're great to play in, and I've received money from in a lot of different ways. Selling pottery, doing commentary, random jobs, throughout my life, and there's nothing better than nerd cash.
Nerd cash.
Yep, that sweet, sweet nerd cash that you can only get at a Magic tournament.
Another way that you can also have some fun with these Opens, if you're not able to make it here, is by doing what you're doing now, watching us on Twitch, and by subscribing to the channel. So you can join the feature match area by signing up. You get exclusive subscriber-only chat, so only subscribers and our moderators get to type in the chat that you guys see there on your screen now, and you get to decide the quarterfinals. So that's going to be later on today. Once we actually have our brackets, we're going to be able to put them up on the screen, and all the subscribers will be able to vote for which quarterfinal match that we're going to broadcast. You get custom emoticons and that sweet badge next to your name, and it's only $5 a month, supports the channel, and gives you all these sweet perks that only the subscribers have access to there on Twitch.
Yeah, in particular, I really like the you decide the quarterfinals. I mean, if I was watching, I would imagine myself like Caesar Augustus in the Colosseum, and I look at the match and I just put my thumb down, and and then obviously click my mouse for the one that I want. But that's how I envision myself doing it.
Likely, well, I want to say likely, but hopefully, our subscribers will go along with me and think that we want to see this mono blue prison deck on camera if it happens to make the top 8.
I have to imagine that's going to be a fan favorite for sure. Most
of the time I'm just like, oh, this mono blue deck, this isn't going to be exciting to watch. But that deck is real exciting to watch because it's not like they're trying to counter everything.
Yeah.
You're just trying to play a bunch of random instants and sorceries.
Yeah, and also in this format, it's so sweet. I mean, we just haven't seen anything like it. Like, not even close.
Yeah.
We haven't seen a mono blue combo deck since, like, they printed really broken cards, like High Tide,
Well, technically, we had a Pickles combo deck in Time Spiral era, which was also a weird deck and fun to watch. But yeah, this mono blue prison deck is real sweet. I'm not sure how it's going to line up against something like blue red Eldrazi.
Yeah.
You just exile the top 20 cards to your deck.
Yeah.
Just you can hit some real
has
good,
a lot of counter spells.
Hits some real good things, and it has a lot of counter spells. But I think the deck's real sweet and definitely has a lot of potential.
Yeah, it also speaks to just how good of a job R&D does with Magic. Magic is just such a sick game. It's so deep, and these standard card pools, they come in and rotate, and so frequently a card pool will rotate, and I'll just think to myself, I feel like there's some decks that people just didn't get a hold of.
Oh, every time.
Yeah, every time, and you just gotta do some brewing, dig deep, and find these cool strategies that you can just blindside opponents. I'm sure with this mono blue combo deck, there's just been so many opponents who shuffled up their cards after losing game 1, looked at their sideboard, and just thought to themselves, like, what am I going to do? I'm not prepared for this.
And we also see the evolution of the standard format just right here with these decks. Like, if we look back to week 1 of Shadows of Innistrad Standard, there were a lot of strong decks. The Humans decks were picked up on right away.
Yeah.
Collected Company strategies were picked up on right away. Like, I don't think we've had as strong of a week 1 decks as we have with Shadows of Innistrad.
Yeah. But a lot of that is Jim Davis and the Metagame Gurus. They really rocked it with that band Humans.
But like where you go from there is what's interesting to me, right? Because like a lot of people are just complacent to play, whatever did well last week. Yeah. I'm just going to play this green-white tokens deck.
Pick a Pro Tour top 8 deck.
I'm just just going to play this Bant Company deck that Jim Davis crushed everybody with. But then you have these players like Alain Trazi, Michael Segal, Jim Davis also helped, that have just come together with this blue-red Eldrazi deck that's new, unique, and extremely powerful. You have this Bant Right deck is something that we haven't seen a whole lot of. This mono blue prison deck. I mean, and we still have another a month and a half before Eldritch Moon comes and changes things even more. What else can people come up with? There's still untapped resources out there.
Yeah, it is really cool. And the other thing that I like about it too is in Standard there's just so many good cards that are on such, like in terms of power level, they're so close to each other, but in functionality they're different. And so even among the Standard archetypes you see a lot of variation.
Well, we have Austin here is on the play for game 2. He's down a game. Fortunately, he did mulligan to 5. He scried to the bottom. And now has a turn 2 Duskwatch Recruiter. It looks like Michael's thinking about just cashing in. a spatial contortion, and he is. He's just going to kill that recruiter. And Austin is just down so many resources here, but he is going to hit his first 3 land drops, so he might still have a game.
Yeah, we might still have a game, but he's going to be running low on gas. I think because he's on the play and he's mulliganed his best path to victory, it's probably with an early aggressive rush. And it was good that he had a 2-drop, but the fact that he didn't have a follow-up play for turn 3 is a little unfortunate. That Duskwatch recruiter, if it had lived, could have done a little bit to dig him out of his mulligan and draw some cards. But that said, we could still see something like a Collected Company be a really big play, or a Reality Smasher hitting the board, kind of run away with the game.
Well, he did mulligan to 5, but he's going to fall to 19 here. He's going to play an Eldrazi Displacer, and he does have 2 copies of Collected Company in his hand to go along with his 3 lands. So if he could hit a 4th land, he might just be right back in this game.
Both of these games have kind of been in Michael's favor. Austin had a little bit of a bumpy start in game 1 also with the, no turn 2 play, turn 3 had a Cryptolith right, and now Austin, I mean, he gets to attack for 3 on this is turn 5, I believe. Mm-hmm. So definitely, without having anything else to deploy to the board, it's definitely not the start he was hoping for.
Well, he is going to miss his 4th land drop. He has 2 copies of Negate in his hand, so he has some protection against cards like Chandra Flamecaller.
Yeah, I have to imagine this warrants a negate.
Austin's going to negate the Chandra.
Chandra is such a good card.
She is.
She is so good.
Michael's going to fall to 15, but he also doesn't have another land to add to his mana here.
I think he might have picked up another negate, so he may be able to buy himself time, but he would really like to have a bit more of a clock than this. That said, if he can counter the next big play and then end of turn have a Collected Company to deploy more pressure, that would be pretty good.
Austin's just going to keep attacking with this Eldrazi Displacer, going to bring Michael down to 12. Just have a copy of Matter Reshaper now. Well, Michael's going to go down to 9 on the attack.
And Matter Reshaper is a great threat to deploy here, because even if Michael had something like another Chandra, that Matter Reshaper is going to help preserve some of that board presence. It's going to be a 2-for-1, ensure that he digs himself out of his mulligan at least a little bit.
See, Michael has a Spawning Bed. And Austin's just picked up his 4th land, so he might still take this game on his mulligan to 5.
Yeah, Michael was fortunate that Austin had kind of a slow start, but Michael hasn't had a whole lot of action. He just had 1 removal spell and a Chandra that ended up getting countered, and this is not a particularly great situation for Michael. He's got a lot of mana. He's got a fair amount of cards, so I'm sure he's going to have some decent options, and we'll see what he can do.
Well, looks like he's going to cash in his Spawning Bed.
I have to imagine this is either a chump block. Yeah. So what makes this a little tricky is the Eldrazi Displacer can make combat a bit more difficult for Michael, so I think that is his best block.
So he is going to go ahead and chump and then level up his Majoring Network to... So it looks like he has 10 mana available now, and he can just slam an Ulamog if he has one.
Yeah, a Drowner of Hope would also be really good, or just getting to a point where he's playing 2 spells a turn. Right now, as the board stands, Michael has got to do something.
Even if he has this Ulamog, and as much as I don't really like the idea of bouncing Ulamog with Reflector Mage, Austin can just Collected Company and, into a Reflector Mage and another threat and still win this game before that Ulamog can come back down.
Yeah. Ulamog would be particularly great, too, because the templating on
Matter Reshaper
reads dies, yeah. So exiling it is the best way to get rid of it.
Looks like Michael's just going to pass the turn.
Ooh, and only 1 creature off of his Collected Company. Granted, that 1 creature could be a potential 2-for-1, but it is still pretty unfortunate. Nothing's really going Austin's way, but he might be able to squeeze this one out anyway.
Wow, I wonder what Michael has in his hand. Austin's going to pick up another land. He still has another copy of Collected Company in his hand. In fact, he has 2 more copies.
It looks like Michael might have a Fiery Impulse in his hand, brought in from the sideboard. Also looks like he has a Kozilek's Return. So he's got some options here.
Kozilek's return would be very good, since he wouldn't have to use his Ulamog on the creatures.
Yep.
He would just be able to exile some lands and set Austin even further back.
One thing that's a little annoying for Michael is his 2 sources of red mana are both Shivan Reefs, meaning that he's going to be taking damage if you cast them. So this looks like it's going to be the Kozilek's return, and it is. So this means that Michael is not going to take any damage if Austin doesn't have a counter, but Austin says, get that Kozilek's return out of here. I'm countering that.
He's going to go ahead and use a negate. Looks like we've got another Kozilek's
Ooh.
return.
Another negate would be great, because that would have put Michael to 1. But wow, so that's pretty good for Austin. Those are 2 great hits. That said, if Michael just slams a big fatty, though, and gets a flashback those Kozilek's returns,
it's like an Ulamog is going to come
be
here.
A devastating play.
It's going to take 2 lands, and it's going to cast both of those Kozilek returns.
And he's going to be able to Ulamog with counter backup. Brutal. Stone Rain to your lands, wipe your board. I've got a 10-10 on the battlefield, and I've still got mana open to do more.
So it looks like Austin is going to Duskwatch Recruiter in response. He's going to find another Sylvan Advocate, but he's going to lose all of his creatures. He's going to lose 2 of his lands, cutting him off of 2 different colors.
So it looks like Michael exiled lands so that Austin would be cut off of white mana. And Austin draws a white mana source off the top.
But it is going to enter the battlefield tapped.
It is, yeah, it's Canopy Vista.
Man, that Ulamog was real devastating. Sylvan Advocate's going to come down for Austin. He's going to play a Canopy Vista and pass the turn back.
And this is the sick game that so many control decks play, where they allow you to get them to a low life total, and then right when you think that the finish line is in sight, they just start coming out with the big haymakers, answering your board, and closing the game out.
So here we're going to have Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger is going to attack Austin. It is a 10-10. It's going to exile the top 20 cards from Austin's deck, which looks like a bunch of Reflector Mages.
Yeah.
Good news for Michael.
It's always nice to take a look at what you exile with Ulamog, even though it is a lot of cards to flip through, and even if you think the game is just going to be over.
In fact, it looked like there was all 4 Reflector Mages in the top 20.
It's good to know, what your opponent may be drawing on the last turn, and now Michael knows it won't be a Reflector Mage, but also just in case you face another deck like this, it may give you a little better idea of what kind of things they may be running.
And here we have Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. He's going to -2 and bounce that Sylvan Advocate back to Austin's hand, and unless he can play 2 creatures here, he's just actually dead to that Ulamog. Now, Austin does have a Collected Company still in his hand, but with all 4 of those Reflector Mages gone, he can't really get Ulamog off of the battlefield at this point.
Yeah, Eldrazi Displacer and Reflector Mage are the only way that Austin would be able to interact with that Ugin on any level, quite frankly.
And if I counted correctly, as Austin fanned through his deck there, he's got about 20 cards left.
Yeah. He's also only got 8 life left. So that'll be game. Austin just didn't have the aggressive draws that he needed. Michael was able to do his thing, develop his mana, ramp up, and then start making some monster plays like Ugin flashing back, or Ulamog flashing back Kozilek's return is definitely got to take the cake for one of the most powerful plays of the day.